Okay, moving on to our next session, acing the tennis college job market. Very lucky to have Katy Young-Staudt here today from Ventura Partners. We've obviously touched upon this topic through the years at our convention and webinars. We did a great session last year at our convention in Naples with myself and three other coaches, just talking about how we went about getting our dream job. And I know this is a question that older coaches get asked all the time. How do I get, how do I put myself in the position that you are someday? And what steps do I need to take? And what did you do about that? So we're extremely fortunate to have really the best in the business who are doing this on a daily basis. One of the top executive firms in the country. They're hiring head coaches, hiring ADs, conference commissioners in the college game. They're also working in the pro space as well. If anybody knows what they're talking about, it's this group here at Ventura Partners and Katy Young. So Katy, just a quick introduction. Katy has established herself as one of the most trusted and influential search consultants in the sports and entertainment worlds. Throughout her career, working in several of the most well-respected executive search firms in the space, she has conducted numerous searches for Division I head coaches and ADs, and has also worked in professional sports world with the likes of the MLB, the NBA, the NHL, PGA Tour, and the USTA. So Katy has also worked in the collegiate administration world, holding positions as Assistant Athletic Director at the University of California, Riverside, and Vice President of Business Development for a national sports nonprofit organization. She was named a rising star in the sports industry by Partnership Activation Magazine and 30 Under 30 in sports by Sports Launch Magazine. So incredible resume. And Katy, thanks so much for educating our coaches today. I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dave. I wish I had you to go alongside me whenever I pitch to clients to get searches, because that was an introduction. But no, I appreciate
Anytime.
You guys having us on, and I apologize. Chad Chalice was supposed to join me today, but he had a client. He got pulled into it's football season, so he's doing a bunch of football searches kind of behind the scenes right now. So, but I promise you're in good hands. And like Dave mentioned, we've done a ton of searches in the collegiate space over the last few years. And recently, you might have seen, came across the ticker last week, Chad and I are actually taking our talents to Turnkey Sports. So we'll be running their college division of Turnkey. Won't affect us much. I'm still staying in Phoenix. Chad will be in Atlanta, continue to do his work from there. But just give us a bigger platform and a lot bigger searches and a bigger scope. So we're excited to do that, but we will still be handling Olympic sport coaches for a lot of clients and that sort of thing. So won't be changing. But if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And I've got a presentation, just a quick little presentation I've prepared for you guys, just so you don't have to take a lot of notes. So I'll start this from the beginning. Just want to talk a little bit about today about managing the search process and how your career, managing your career and kind of getting to where you want to go in your career. So I put together a couple slides here just to manage that so you guys can see my screen. And like I mentioned, we're now with Turnkey, and Dave touched on a little bit of this, but I'll kind of go over just some of our work that we've done. Can you guys all, I'm sure you can all see that. Let me know if there's a problem. So this is my 15th year in the athletics space. Started my career back with a guy named Bob Bodine at Eastman and Bodine back when I was
so proud of you.
2. And really enjoyed working with Bob. I love the search industry and kind of got my feet wet with him doing basketball and football. And traditionally search firms have been used for AD searches and some basketball and football. But now, just as as sports grow, as coaches are making more money, as these hires are just becoming more important than ever, student athlete experience, mental health, all the things, you've got to make sure that coaches are who they say they are. And that's why athletic directors tend to use us to go out and find the biggest and the best. And we'll get to that a little bit later, but just a little bit about my background. You can kind of see there, bio, Dave mentioned, done a lot of Olympic sport head coaches and that sort of thing. So I'll skip over that. And just a sampling of searches we've done in the Olympic sports space. You'll notice a couple tennis coaches, Chris Drake at Yale, Caroline Lilly, Robbie, a couple tennis people on here. So really enjoyed working with those schools to help them land top coaches, and actually the fencing coach for Yale as well. No one had ever thought a search firm would help with a fencing coach search, but Yale is a unique institution. It has a lot of alums that have a lot of opinions. So as do most places. but I was able to come in and help Vicky Chun, the athletic director, really figure out what she was doing in fencing. We ended up actually hiring the interim coach, Haiben Wang, but enough about fencing. We'll move on back to tennis. So today, coaches are looking for, or ADs are looking for something a lot bigger than just a coach, right? So you guys are handling everything, whatever level you're at, whether you're an AI coach, you're a high school coach, you're a college assistant coach, head coach, you guys do it all. And this is something ADs are really looking for in their next head coach, someone who's innovative, someone who has great integrity, and someone who's collaborative in the department, someone who's going to get out of their office and be a leader in the department, not just in the tennis program. So this is something we're kind of seeing. I'll let you just read some of these things on the screen here, but looking for a CEO. And that can come up in your interview process, I think, a little bit, just kind of whenever you're given a chance to tell who you are as a coach and a person. That's a chance to really, especially if you're an assistant coach right now looking to be a head coach, you have that ability to say, look, I've had great mentors. I've done every single thing that a CEO does, except for maybe have the head coach title. And I know in tennis, you guys are working with student athletes individually, and you're essentially head coaches of your own unit, right? So just be prepared to talk about a little bit about that. So talking about professional development today, who are you? Who are your mentors? If you don't have a list, you can't get what you can't see, right? So you have to have a list of your next dream jobs. They don't have to be exactly the jobs you would want, but just an idea of kind of where would you go? Have that conversation with your spouse, your partner, or the person in your family that you're living with, to see kind of where they may want to go, right? Because if I call you and we've got a search open at a certain institution, you may say, hey, I never really thought about moving there. So kind of have those conversations up front. Be willing to have that conversation with your spouse and your family, just to kind of decide, hey, where might you move? So when something's open, you don't have to you can say, hey, we're in, right? So these searches move pretty quickly. And whether a search firm is doing the search or not, or if it's just an athletic director or a sport administrator, they move pretty quickly. They want to get someone in there. You guys have got recruits. You guys have got practice going on, assuming we're not in a pandemic. And so I think when it comes to your career, you've got to really treat it like recruiting. You guys are the greatest recruiters in the world. You recruit, everything about the mom, the dad, the club coach, the juniors coach, whatever happens to be, everything about this kid that you're recruiting. But when it comes to your career, you're not really doing your research. You're not really knowing what this institution's about or who the AD is or what may be the priorities, right? There are reasons jobs open. Someone gets fired. Someone gets fired for egregious behavior. Someone gets fired for losing. Someone moves on to a better job, or someone, retires. And so there are a lot of reasons jobs are open. So if you can think of, okay, why is this job open? Then you can really dig into what they're looking for. And not every person's going to be a fit for every job. So make sure that you do your research and you know everything about that institution before you raise your hand and say, I'm interested. Don't just go for every job. Another key aspect of the process of professional development is just relationships on your own campus. People that it could be your sport administrator, it could be your athletic trainer, it could be your athletic director. Get to know those people, go to lunch with them, go kind of build your career from the inside of your campus out. So of course there's some internal constituents, like I mentioned, the athletic director, or there's your conference commissioner. Who's over tennis championships for your conference? Do you know that person? Do you know Scott Tribley? Do you know the USTA personnel? Do you know the ITA staff here that's putting on this awesome virtual convention? Because chances are someone in that athletic department might have worked with them in another place, and they're going to call them about you, or they're going to call and get names. Because let's be honest, ADs don't really know, unless they're tennis people, they don't really know anything about tennis coaches and how to, where to look and who's who and who's the hot coach up and coming or whatever. So you got to have some good allies that you can kind of rely on during your search process, and just to help you get better. Mentioned your administration and referencing. So they know other administrators just like the coaches. You guys can sit and name 50 other tennis coaches, but you might name your own AD or maybe an AD you worked with at the previous school you were at. But all these administrators, all these athletics directors, they all talk. And so just like you guys know, and you're networking at these conferences, they're doing the same thing. And so if you don't know your own AD, when that other AD that you're looking at that job calls your AD, then, that's a problem. So make sure, even if you're an assistant, you know those people. On-court demeanor, this is a big thing in tennis. I understand we get frustrated and throw rackets once in a while, but I think just being an even-keeled human being, and in that way, and if an AD does see you coaching, they're like, wow, that person's really impressive. They're not overreacting or, being arrogant or whatever on the court. So you have to be known to be needed. I always tell coaches this, but it's so true. And it's really true in any job search. If we don't know who you are, then the AD can't hire you. So make sure you're doing everything you can do, and not being a self-promoter, but just getting out of your office and making those connections. A little bit about, Caroline, obviously at KU, she came in and interviewed and just blew them away at Auburn. They loved her energy, they loved her passion. And I put a picture of her on purpose, because she was looking for her next job and to be a head coach. And, there are certain places she probably wasn't going to look, but Auburn, she asked the right questions. She asked about resources. She asked about the plan. She had a plan for her career. And so coming into this interview, we had a just quick story. So we were down at the NCAA championships last year when we had them in Florida, Orlando, USTA Training Center. And we were actually doing 3 tennis coach searches at that time. And we had representatives from each 3 schools, and we were shuffling candidates in and out, and you might've just gotten off the court and, playing warming up your student athletes and coaching or whatever, but these people came in and they were ready and they were prepared, and Caroline just blew them away. So you have to be ready, right? If you're going to be a head coach, you got to start preparing now. It can't be at the championship when you're about to meet the AD. That way you can tailor your interview to that specific job, but you got to know who you are. You got to be learning where you are. You got to be making sure that you are responsible for things that a head coach is responsible for. That could be academics, that could be, whatever the liaison with marketing, whatever that might be. Make sure you're taking those extra responsibilities that are in addition to your job description of coaching that will show an AD that you're ready. You got to have a plan. If you don't have a plan for your life, someone's got a plan for you. So you got to make sure that you know that plan and you're going to stick to the plan. Are you currently at a successful program? Now, it's not always about wins and losses because it's more about relationships, right? Or individuals, or tennis is a unique sport in that way. But if you're just on this consistently losing program, that's probably not going to set you up to be a head coach. So make sure you're doing your job where you are and that you're preparing student athletes to win and you got that reputation. Make sure you're preparing for the interview, sample interview questions. I'm happy to send some of those out if anybody wants to practice in the mirror or video yourself. I think that's really important. You cannot prepare enough and know your own story enough. So when you get that call and I say, hey, in an hour, this AD wants to meet with you, and that might happen, right? So you've got to make sure you're prepared. Work internal to external. We talked about that. Your reputation's everything, and have patience. Don't just jump at every single job. I see coaches all the time in every sport. I want to be a head coach, so I'm just going to go for every job. Well, you got to do your research and make sure that you're a fit. And fit is really about your why. Fit is about your why. And so if you can't tell me why you're interested in a job and why it's a fit, then you're probably not right for the job. Attitude and hours, and head coaches will agree with me. If you're an assistant coach looking to be a head coach, you got to do your job. You actually have to do your job before you can be a head coach. And so running around trying to be a head coach is not going to work for anybody. So make sure you're taking care of business where you are. This is something I get questions on all the time. How do I have this conversation with my head coach or with my athletic director that I'm, maybe you're at a smaller school, an AIA or a D2 school, and you want to be a D1 coach. So how do you have that conversation with your own AD? Well, I think it's really about timing. Don't go in there when they're busy. Set aside a certain amount of time, whether you're an assistant or a head coach, to have that conversation with your supervisor and make sure that they know what your goals and dreams are. So when they aren't surprised when, there is that special job and you need them to make a call, you need a reference and endorsement and advice on how to go after that job. So timing is everything. Make sure you're, not catching them in a bad time, and you carve out, a couple days a month or something just to talk and have a relationship. People hire people, right? Not resumes. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but 87% of jobs in sports are placed off of one reference. And that's a statistic by a Gallup poll. And so when you're in tennis and you're applying online for some job, well, if you don't know someone who's recommending you, or the AD didn't call your AD, and it's sports, right? Everyone, and that's how you guys hire assistant coaches. If you're a head coach, or it does no different. So make sure you're outperforming and over delivering on everything you're doing where you are. And your sports supervisor or your head coach, their network will become your network. Next year, when we aren't in a pandemic and we're all in Vegas and we're all hanging out, use that time wisely. Don't just go off on your own, but make sure you're having those conversations. And really, and I don't like the word networking. I think it's a bad word. I think networking is kind of crap because it implies disingenuous. But it's friendship, it's building relationship, it's building trust, and being able to have those people in your corner that know you and like you and that can recommend you. So quick overview of a search firm. I know a lot of you probably haven't worked with a search firm in tennis specifically, but like I mentioned, we had 3 searches that we were interviewing for last year, and then 2 of them came after the championship. So, you know, and then obviously Jordan here is a couple of years ago at K-State was elevated to that role. So it can mean a lot of things with a search firm, right? So the misconception about search firm is that we get to pick the winner, which is not the case. So the ADs hire us to go out and run a great process, make sure we're evaluating, assessing rising talent, identifying rising talent, and getting to know coaches, just like you know, I'm hopefully going to get to know all of you when we actually can be all together. But we don't decide who wins the job. We don't make the hire. We can make recommendations saying, hey, I really was impressed with this person or that person. But at the end of the day, the AD is making the hire. So when it comes to head coaches, and we do a lot more than obviously just tennis, you know, men's basketball, women's basketball, football. And now with our new venture with Turnkey Sports, they do a ton in pro. And so they do team presidents, all kinds of media executives. So it's kind of interesting world. But as far as we're concerned, Team Ventura that's moved over to Turnkey, you know, it's somebody that an AD can trust, someone that they trust, that's confidential, that's recruiting talented, happy people in their jobs. We're not looking at a bunch of online applicants over here. We're going after people, and I'm using resources, our USTA, whether it's Alyssa or it's Scott or someone, to call and say, hey, do you know anything about this person? Or, hey, we just picked up this search, who do you like? And we call other athletic directors, other coaches. We built this network of coaches that I pick up the phone and call, you know, any of my tennis coach friends and ask their opinion, or say, hey, we just got this, what do you think? So when I was doing Yale, Chris Drake obviously got the job and moved from Dartmouth. So I didn't know a lot. I mean, this is fairly new space for us. So I picked up the phone and called a few tennis coaches that I knew and said, hey, what do you think of Chris? And they were all like, oh, if you could get him to go to Yale, it'd be unbelievable. So I worked my tail off trying to convince Chris, hey, this is a better job than Dartmouth. And so just really being able to know the AD, and Chris is like, well, what's the athletic director like? What's the deputy AD? Who's overseeing tennis here? What are these people like? I don't know them. And so to be able to genuinely tell Chris how great Vicky Chun was as the AD at Yale and what a great opportunity this was, it was me selling Vicky. It's better than Vicky calling Chris and selling Vicky. So we can be used as a middleman. We're used to reference. We're used to seamlessly run a process and make sure coaches have that resource to ask questions, because sometimes you won't know the AD. And so I think it's beneficial to have someone like us to be able to help you along. And we're not agents. We don't get paid if you get the job or not. We get paid to run the search. We don't get paid based on who gets the job at all. So it's, you know, background referencing, that sort of thing, really important. So there are 4 reasons really you should be looking at in a job. Four things you should be looking at. First is the people. Make sure the athletic director is going to be supportive of tennis, right? We've seen a lot of programs cut. We've seen a lot of things going on, and making sure that athletic director is a great person. It's a great, you know, go where you're celebrated, not tolerated. They should be recruiting you, you know, making sure that you're a good fit. And the next thing is really the tools. Does this job give you the tools to be successful? What's the facility like? What's the budget like? What's, you know, are they going to allow you, if you're an assistant, to do more than your job description? Opportunity. It's about fit. It's about, why is this a great job for me? Not just personally, but professionally. Is it a setback or a setup? And some people may take lateral jobs because it is a, you know, traditionally been a great tennis program, or for whatever reason, they have that affinity for that school, or they've got like a like-minded, you know, situation where, like when Chris moved over to Yale, he already knew the academic index of the Ivy. He didn't, it was a very easy learning curve, just a little bit bigger, you know, bigger platform being Yale. So what is that opportunity? And then it's about growth. Are they going to allow you to leave a legacy here? Is this a situation where you're going to be able to come in and do something special and be able to leave a legacy, whether you're there for 5 years or 50 years? That's something you should definitely consider when you're looking at a new opportunity. So how do you get involved in the search? You see this job, so-and-so left, this is open. Well, first you have to ask, what are they looking for, right? What are they looking for? Why did the person leave? We mentioned that before. Understanding the role of your current boss and mentors. You guys seeing a recurring theme here? It's relationships. It's who you're working for. That matters. Your mentors, your advocates, your allies. Someone who knows the AD or a tennis sport administrator. Someone who knows if it's a search firm involved, which it might not be. But if that's a thing, then know someone, you know, that can recommend you to the search firm. Be willing to move. I know this is a tough one when families, you know, come about, and it's just be willing to take that move. And if it's not a good move for you, it's probably not a good move for the university to hire you. So make sure that it's a great place and you want to be there and your family's going to be happy. So references, endorsements, testimonials. Like I mentioned, if you don't know your conference commissioner, if you don't know over tennis, if you don't know the people at the NCAA and people at USTA, who are these people that are going to vouch for you? And you can't have 10 people call, you get one or two. Don't pick 10, pick one or two really important ones that really know you. And don't just pick an influencer to call. I do men's basketball and I say, don't have Coach K call and pronounce your name wrong, right? So really important that they know who you are as a coach, know who you are as a person, and can speak to your abilities as it pertains to that particular role. Just a few tips here, things I've written down in the past that I've seen. If someone calls you about a job, whether it's an athletic director or a head coach looking to hire you as an assistant or a search firm or whoever, return the call. Even if you're not interested, you never know where that person's going to be a couple of years down the road. And if they're impressed with you right off the bat, and you make the phone call back and learn a little bit more and say, hey, that's not for me, but maybe you give them a name or something, just make sure you're returning calls and just be a person that's a normal human being. If you don't move forward in the search process after the phone interview, either it's an AD or whatever, write them a note. Thanks for the consideration. Really appreciate best of luck with your search, that sort of thing. Because again, you never know where that AD might land and that you were impressive to them in that process. And maybe you're on their list next time, right? So, and this kind of goes back, can you interview tomorrow? This happens. Ask Scott Trively, this happens in Orlando or wherever. We're there, we're talking to people and all of a sudden, hey, I heard really good things about this person. Well, let's get them in for an interview. And that happened a lot. That happens a lot, especially in tennis, when you're all kind of there at the same place at the national championships, everyone's kind of there. And it's a great place for athletic directors to go and have a lot of conversations without spending a lot of money to fly you into their school. So make sure you adapt to their timeline. Hey, can you meet tomorrow at 2:30? Yeah, get off the court at 2. Okay, fine. Brush your hair, take your hat off, maybe put on a blazer over your t-shirt and walk in. And we'll get to some other things about the interview process in a minute, but make sure you're adapting to their timeline. And the proof of desire is pursuit. And you guys see this all the time with your student athletes. And you've got to know that in between desperate and interested. People don't hire people hire people that want the job. Playing hard to get in the first date isn't going to end well. So if you're this elitist, you're not going to be interested in the job. The AD can sense that, and they're probably not going to interview you next or give you to the next round. So you landed the interview, you walked in, we've said, okay, here you go, let's go. The AD's here, they've got 2 representatives from the school, maybe the search firm or whoever's in there. And if you're at a different level and you don't have a search firm, but this is still what the hiring committee is looking for. Do I know you? How do I know you? Who recommended you? That's number one. That's the number one thing they're looking at. Not of your resume, not of your wins and losses. And then the next thing they're looking at is, do I like you? And this is sequential, right? So do I know you? Do I like you? Do you understand my needs? And are you the best for me in my situation at this time? If they don't know you and they don't like you, they don't really care what your resume says. They don't care who you coached. If you're a pain in the butt, they're going to send you right back up the door. And so building that likability factor right off the bat with the committee or the athletic director, knowing something about them, walking in and if the athletic director you've got to find some sort of commonality, right? It's building rapport. You've got to quickly build rapport with that AD and for them to be able to settle down, okay, I really like this person. And then you can talk about understanding their needs of their school or whatever they're looking at, and then talk about why now. So that's just kind of what they're kind of thinking when you're walking in the door. And it's true. You think about that when you're recruiting someone, right? Do I know you? Who recommended you? How do I know you? If I watched you play, do I like you? Are you, are you going to be a good teammate? All those other things that are likability factors, you're doing it with your recruiting. So that's exactly how ADs are evaluating you as a coach. Do's of the search process. I'm not going to read all these. You guys can read. But the biggest things I would take away from this list is walk in, dress professionally, take off your hat. And I understand you guys are getting off the court. And if you are going to campus, wear a suit, wear a tie, wear a nice dress, wear whatever it is you wear to interviews, but look professional. Pad or paper to take notes, and make sure that you have a 5 to 10 minute, probably around the side of 5, intro speech, depending on how long the interview is. That's really kind of regurgitating your resume, but not really, because they have that in front of them, but kind of telling why. If there are certain stops you made, why did you make those certain career decisions, or talking about your family and introducing yourself. Where did you grow up? And this is the time where you can tie everything you've done into whatever that job, whatever it is the job is you're interviewing for. So make sure you know something about the school. You've, if it's an AD in the room, talk about, hey, I read your strategic plan and I noticed this included a new tennis facility, or whatever it is. This is your chance to shine and let them know you've done your research, but also talk about yourself and, you know, smile, eye contact, all those things are important. But you have to bring energy and enthusiasm. I've done so many coach searches where the coach walks in and they're just very, you know, just not really that energetic about being there. They've got other stuff going on. And no, you got to bring energy. You got to be enthusiastic, show humility, don't come in like a know-it-all. And it's about the institution. It's not about you. It's really about that school and what they're looking for. And they work there. You don't work there. So you think you're a fit there, but you might not be, right? It's not your job to decide if you're a fit. As long as you think you'd be, you know, a good coach there, then the AD really determines the fit. So don't be late. Don't say anything negative. Don't ramble. You got to be relaxed, provide content, but be concise in your answers. Specific examples are always great. Talk about student athlete stories. You guys have a million stories on what you do with student athletes every day. It's incredible. So I would keep a journal log, you know, whether it's just a Word doc you open up in your computer, and think about all the situations you go through on a daily basis. And they may come up in an interview one day, situational interviews. Hey, what would you do in this situation? And then that way you've got a storybook handy to study before you go in for your interview. So when you are asked those questions, it's top of mind to you. It's like clockwork. You don't have to think of a story or an example. You've got all those done. So anytime anything happens right now with a student athlete, or you've won, or this lesson was learned, or whatever it was, make sure you're keeping track of those so they're top of mind when you do get in your interview. Don't interrupt the AD, let them talk. Those committee people are so excited to ask their questions. They're probably not really listening to a lot of your answers anyway. They're just listening to how you say it and how you answer your questions. And if you answer the question, they're so excited and nervous to ask their question. You know, make sure that you're in there, and you're going to be nervous, but don't fidget. I've seen a lot of people on Zoom. This is something you may catch a Zoom interview this spring if you guys are interviewing for a job. People are rocking in their chairs. They're like doing this, and just have a nice background. Make sure that you're poised and you're speaking and you're looking at the camera. That's my Zoom interview tip of the day. And a golden rule: if you're a jerk as an assistant coach, that's going to come out. Whether the AD makes a call about you, or a search firm makes a call, or another coach makes a call, that's all going to come out. So make sure you're treating people right. You know, sports medicine staff, you never know when a former student athlete might have a relationship with an AD and you didn't know it. They might call that person about you, or someone that used to work 5 schools ago. So make sure you're being a good person and understand that, you know, you're referencing off lists might come from an academic advisor or a strength and conditioning coach. That was long, kind of a long-winded presentation, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. I want you guys to screenshot. I don't know if you can see on the side here with these boxes, but my email, katyyoungstaudt@turnkeyse.com. I'm in Phoenix. If you guys through the pandemic are you know, out and about, love to see you, love to have coffee anytime. So shoot me an email, follow me on Twitter. And I want to open it up for questions now. I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And back to Dave here. So I went through that quickly, but I want to make sure we have time for questions. So
yeah, thank you for that, Katy. That was great, and we do have plenty of time for questions. So please start putting them in the Q&A box here, and I'll moderate. Katy, as they're thinking about their questions, just one thing that's come up a few times, and I'm a former college coach myself, so I was involved in some searches, whether it's for tennis coaches or other college coaches, but you know, this question of how aggressive to be, right? If you don't hear back from the sports supervisor or the SWA or the athletic director, you know, some coaches will talk about, hey, I just charged into the office there and gave them my resume, and others will, you know, maybe be too standoffish. So what is that balance, and how can coaches figure out what that balance is in terms of how aggressive to be with trying to get a job?
Sure. Well, I think that's a little situational. The number one thing you can do is really find someone who knows that AD. And that's where coming back to your own campus really, really gives you a leg up on your competition. So if you know your own sport administrator, chances are they're going to know the sport administrator at that other school, especially if you're an assistant coach or something and, you're trying to get your foot in the door. And a lot of head coaches, if you're interested in a job, they're going to see your record. They're going to know who you are. You're Googleable, right? You've got kind of a track record out there of achievement. And that's a little easier to have, if you have a good relationship with your AD and your dream job comes open, if you're a head coach, we'll have that conversation with your AD or your SWA or your senior administrator overseeing your sport. But the best way to get in door to an AD is by having someone else introduce you to that AD and say, hey, look, so-and-so, I've got this guy, Dave Mullins, he's unbelievable. I think he'd be really good for your job. And the AD's like, well, I didn't even know who Dave Mullins was, so let's just call him. And so that's how these ADs operate in their own little silo of the AD world. And so if you can get to one AD, which should be your own AD, or a previous AD at your old school or whatever, they've got to at least, that's kind of an AD code, right? Like an AD can call an AD. But if you're having a bunch of coaches call the AD, that's really not effective. So find your one or two administrators that are really in your corner that can make those calls for you, and make sure you use the calls wisely. Don't just have them call 20 schools a year. Pick the 2 or 3 that you think really you have a shot and have them make that call and that introduction.
Very good. So questions coming in here. How many pages should the resume be?
Oh, that's a good one. I like probably just a front page, which is like a bio, a picture, maybe something kind of cool with your bio. And then I would say 1 or 2 pages for the resume. I don't like going any much more than that. I mean, you guys are coaches. You're not writing CVs for, getting a physician job or something. It's not like you've got to have all this research on there. So I think 2 pages is probably good. 1 sometimes isn't enough because you don't get enough content. The biggest thing about resumes is results. So if you can talk about how you turn something around, or you produce certain amount of national champions, or I think results are really important, but don't forget about the campus piece of the results. You've got to think about tennis results. Obviously that's the given, right? But what have you done on campus? What have you done for life skills, community service, things that you've done with your team, special events, those sorts of things that you can do that the AD might not know that you're in charge of. And so make sure you put those on there. And I think just making a resume results oriented is really key.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any other advice around cover pages or resumes? I'm sure you've seen some brilliant ones and some that aren't not so good.
I think I would have an expert look at my resume. If I were you, you guys are coaches. You're not resume experts by any means, and you're probably not interviewing experts. So have someone train you. Find a person that can kind of help you prep for your interview. It could be an administrator, could be another tennis coach. It could be someone who's you just admired in your athletic department. Have them mock interview you. I would have that relationship with my sports supervisor that they're kind of the go-to person to help you. And everyone's willing to help people, I think. And if they're not, then you need to find somebody else that is. Mm-hmm. I would say just find an expert. Have someone who's a grammatical expert look at your resume, make sure there's no obvious errors or spelling errors, things like that. If that's not your forte, find someone that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's plenty of options online, right? And that's the funny thing. Even there's these services on campus. I mean, coaches will tell their student athletes to go get the resume checked out, but then won't do it for their own resume. So take advantage of that. So another question here: if I go for a job interview, when do I tell my sports administration or sports supervisor?
Are you a head coach?
Let's assume they're a head coach.
Assuming you're a head coach, I think you've got to have that relationship with them. And I think it's okay to kind of explore and see what the school's looking for and maybe kind of feel them out a little bit. But your sports supervisor should be your advocate, right? So they work with you on a daily basis. Chances are someone's going to call them about you off list anyway, and you don't want to really blindside them. So I would say, assuming you have a good relationship, and it can't be every job, but if you really think you have a shot at the job and you really want to go after it, have that conversation. Say, look, I really like it here, but I want to grow in my career, and I want to be upfront and honest with you and transparent in my desire to be a head coach, at a different level, or whatever school it might be, and maybe have a list of some dream jobs that if they were to come open, those are places you'd leave for. And maybe just have that conversation up front, so when it does come, they're not as surprised. I wouldn't lie about it, because these ADs talk, like I mentioned. If you're going for a job, don't apply online if you're a head coach, because you never know who's going to see that, right? And someone may know someone you're recruiting, or it could be an HR person looking at it. Before you apply online, make sure that you're a candidate for the job. So that means, calling the AD, saying, hey, look, I'm interested in the job, or whoever's running the search, could be a sport administrator. But I would try to find out if you're a legit candidate and viable. Go spamming your resume all over the place,
Mhm. Okay, another question here. If you know another program's coach is left, but the job hasn't been posted yet, do you recommend reaching out to the AD and letting them know you're interested, or is it better to wait for the job posting?
Well, some jobs don't get posted. Depends on what kind of school you're at, right? So if it's a private school, they may not have to post the job. And some public schools get around posting jobs and going through someone like us, a search firm. So you gotta get to the bottom of it. You gotta figure out who do you know in that department, or who does someone know that you know, to be able to find out what's going on. And you guys talk. I mean, it's not a secret why a job opens, right? Everyone kind of knows why a job's open. And I would maybe just send the athletic director a note and say, hey, just noticed that so-and-so left. I'm interested in learning more. And again, you don't want to say you're interested in the job yet, because you don't know what the job is. You don't know what they're looking for. So interested in learning more is different than I'm interested in the job and I want the job. So I wouldn't just go hardcore, I want this job, and you don't even know what the job is. Make sure that you are being mindful of why the job's open, making sure you're shooting the email to the AD or having someone find out behind the scenes for you what's going on. And then, just, hey, I'm expressing interest in learning more. I don't know what you're looking for, but it's an intriguing job. It's a great place. And I'm just interested in learning more. And that way they can write you back and say, hey, our search process is starting in 2 weeks from now. The job's going to be posted. Or, hey, thank you for your information. I'll keep this on file when we start our search. At least you kind of made that connection, and you're not going full force yet, because you don't even know if they're looking for a person like you, right? Mm-hmm. So that way you're not really like aggressively going for it, but you're still trying to learn more about it.
Okay. Quick question here, just a concern about sharing photos. Some organizations would have to toss those upon receipt to protect from claims of discrimination.
Photos like in your bio?
I assume, yeah, photos. If you you mentioned including that in the front page.
Oh, just like in your profile. I mean, I just think it's cool to see action photos, like you with your student athletes. I mean, you can Google this, right? If I've got Dave Mullins up for a job, all I have to do is Google his name, and there's going to be a photo of him. It's not like a secret photo, right? You guys are on Twitter, social media. You guys have bios that are very public. Your recruits are looking at your bios all the time. So, I mean, they're going to know, like, they're with one Google keystroke what you look like. So I just think it's kind of cool. It makes it interesting if you do. I'm not saying plaster 40 photos of yourself on your resume. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have just some cool action photos of you coaching it, and it helps them envision you as their head coach if they see you, and maybe not like a bio photo necessarily, but just some cool action photos on your bio sheet. Does that make sense? I mean, they're going to be able to Google you and see your photo or not. And no, they won't have to. Okay, I see the question now. No, there's no throwing away. I mean, this is a head coaching job you're going for, not some, applicant online type job. So this isn't like you're applying to work at Bank of America and you're going to monster.com. So I think once you submit your materials, I mean, happens every single coaching search. Football coaches have these, 90-page tab portfolios with 100 glossy photos of themselves as they're sending the AD. And so I'm not suggesting that, but I think just something that differentiates you and lets an AD kind of see your personality and see, you're just kind of cool, action photos of you coaching. I think that's kind of differentiating.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Another question, at the D1 level, do ADs prefer head coaching experience or a Power 5? I assume they mean head coaching experience maybe at a different division or mid-major, or being a Power 5 assistant coach.
That's a great question. I think it depends on the school and the success. So if you're looking at a big time Power 5 head coaching job, well, they're probably going to want some sort of either head coaching experience at the Division I level or, a top assistant coach at the Division I level. But if you're at a school, maybe it's a Ohio Valley Conference school, or it's a Patriot League school or something, to that effect, I think that they would consider a D3 coach or a D2 coach, head coach, not an assistant coach. So I think it just varies depending on the level and the type of school you're looking at working at and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes coaches are conflicted, right? Should they take that Power 5 assistant coach job or should they go and try and get that head coaching experience? But like you said, it's just case by case and
it's really case by case, Dave. And I think that some people, if you've already been a head coach and you've been successful at any level, that record's not going away, right? You still have that track record. You still got those student athletes that were successful, that you've been mentoring and coaching. You've built a great program at whatever level. So in the AD's mind, that's a validation that you can lead. You're a CEO, you can lead whatever division that is. You can still lead people and you've been successful at it. The Power Five, I think really you get into better recruiting, more talent, coaching, kids that are more talented, achieving success on a national stage, that sort of thing. So when you're an assistant coach at a Power Five school, you're coaching these athletes, right? Doesn't matter if you're a head coach running the program or you're just coaching them, right? It's tennis is a unique sport in that. I mean, you guys that are assistant coaches at Power Five are already coaching. You're already coaching, right? So it's not the coaching part they're questioning, it's the ability to run a program. So if you've done that at another level, you're going to have a leg up on someone who hasn't done that at another level.
Right. And there was a question or a statement in there just about make sure you're checking your contract before applying for another job. So yeah, if you what would your advice be around that in terms of just and that probably pops up in the contract negotiations. I'm not sure if you guys help with that process, or what would your advice be around contracts?
Yeah, we do. And typically if we pick up a search, for a head tennis coach, the athletic director is going to say, okay, here's kind of my short list. Maybe I'll say, here are 5 people I really like for the job. And then of course you get other people referring you along the way. So if I reach out to you or an AD reaches out to you and you've got something in your contract that says I cannot talk to another school without maybe getting the permission of your athletic director, and I'm reaching out to you, it's not like you're applying for the job. You can talk to me. You maybe not talk to the other AD, but you can talk to a search firm. I'm a third party. I don't work for a school. So you're able to have that conversation. That's the other unique aspect of having a search firm. If you're an AD, we can talk to anybody we want. We can go after, we can gauge interest. We can find out, hey, what would it take to make a move? And then their AD and the other AD might not even know, that it's going on. So that's the way to kind of get around it. You don't ever want to be, disingenuous. You want to make sure you're transparent with your AD. So if there is a job you want to go after, have that conversation. Say, hey, look, I saw this open. It's a dream job of mine. I know in my contract it says I need to notify you before, and I use applying loosely. It's not like you're, like I mentioned, on monster.com spamming your resume. And if it's online, don't just go spam your resume to an online portal with 75 other candidates. It's not. They may say, why is this head coach applying online? I mean, an AD would look at that and go, hey, are they trying to run from something? They automatically think they're a candidate for this job. That's when that phone call comes into play. You yourself, you have someone call on your behalf, like another AD that knows that AD and knows you. There's ways to get around it. And I think that just finding out what they're looking for and doing your due diligence and research ahead of time before applying for the job or telling your AD, hey, I'm going to go after that. Because why would you want to tell your AD you're going after a job you can't get? You want to make sure you can get the job, make sure you're a viable candidate first, right?
Okay, and then Katy, in your experience, is it a disadvantage to not be a US citizen? Have you been part of any college hires involving non-citizens?
Yeah, we have. I think it depends on the school. Some schools are sticklers for visas and that sort of thing, or they don't want to sponsor people or for whatever reason, but some are. And so I would just find that out ahead of time, find out if they're willing to hire a non-US citizen. And, some schools are, some schools aren't. It's really situational.
And have you seen any trends in that regard? I mean, are colleges less likely over the last 5 years, 10 years to hire international coaches, or do you have any data on that?
Not really in the tennis front. It just, like I mentioned, it kind of varies school by school. We haven't really run into a lot of it. So I'm not probably that person to ask about that, Dave. I'm sorry. I don't know rules and that sort of thing, but that's a great question. And if I were you, whoever's asking that question, ask your athletic director. Hey, do you think I would have an issue with this? Or once the job opens, that's something you probably should just find out about that individual school.
Yeah, as an international person myself, I just anecdotally, it appears that it's become a little more challenging over the last decade or so, and institutions seem a little less likely to sponsor, and a lot more bureaucracy to go through to get to that point. But great point. Check with your AD, your associate AD, and try and get their perspective on it. And they're speaking with other ADs all the time, as you say.
So I would highly recommend finding out how your own campus deals with it, and how do you have a job there, right? How do you have a job on that campus? And look for other campuses that have those trends, that have hired international people, and maybe go for a job at one of those places, where you've seen it happen before.
Have you found any point where institutions become concerned that coaches changing jobs too often to hire, even if the moves are positive career changes?
I mean, sometimes you get red flags, right? But we all understand we're in the industry of sports and competition. If you get a chance to move up, like, it just depends on your job. If you're jumping from, a low major to a mid major, and then to a high major, and then back to a low major, that's a red flag to me. Like, why would you do that, right? Would you have a story behind that? So I always want to give the benefit out and ask what their stories are. It could have been their aging mother was in Boise and they had to take a job back wherever, right? You don't know what someone's life is like, and so I think being able to dig into those situations. But if you're just all over the place, and one year you're assistant here, and then you're here, and then you're here and here, that's a red flag. But it's just something I would try to have my story and explain. If I'm a coach that's kind of jumped around a little bit, I would make sure that I have my why behind those moves, and have those ready, and be honest about it. And I don't know that it's necessarily a red flag, but I think that it just deserves an explanation.
And then, if I get a job offer, how much can I negotiate?
That's a really good question. So if it's your first head job and there are 3 other assistant coaches that are basically with your background, you don't have a lot of room to negotiate, because one of those guys is going to take the job, or women are going to take the job for that price, right? But if you're a sitting head coach, you got a lot more leverage. If you're an assistant, first time head coaching job, you might not have a lot of leverage on that, unless you're just making obscenely more amount of money than what they're paying. You can always kind of have that, and maybe negotiate a club in here and there, or something, golf membership, I don't know. So there may be some ways to do that, or maybe on your moving expenses. Say you're going for your first head job, and the moving expenses, okay, we're going to pay you $5,000 to move, and this is the salary. Well, I'm moving from North Carolina to California, so I'm going to need more moving expenses up front, or a signing bonus. Those sorts of things are negotiable, as long as you can kind of tell them, hey, why I need this, or hey, I'm making $125,000 now, and you just offer me 120. That's kind of, but if you want a head job, you want a head job, right? So sometimes it's just, are you willing to bet on yourself? But I would say if you are a head coach, you probably got a little more leverage than an assistant coach, especially if they're coming after you. If you haven't just been stalking them for the job, and they know that you'll take it anyway. That's one thing. And then the other thing is, they've been pursuing you. Hey, what's it going to take to get you, sort of thing. Then you've got some leverage.
And around the negotiation as well, right? It doesn't always have to be salary. It could be bonuses. It could be, car stipend. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in the salary, but there's other things there. What are some of those bonuses? I mean, again, it depends on the level, but have you seen any changes in recent time to what coaches are negotiating on?
Absolutely. I think, academic, APR is a thing. Mostly, I think tennis is pretty good APR overall, but I think APR, I think GPA, community service. Hey, if we have this many events, then, you're bonused on that. You're bonused on champions, right? You're bonused on success on the court. And so I think all those things kind of come into your term sheet when you're first getting a job. I would try to include some incentives. Say, hey, look, I'm a person that likes goals, and I like to reach my goals, and I'm betting on myself and my student athletes. And so I'd like to throw some, incentives in for bonuses. And most athletic departments have those built out in coaches' contracts anyway. So that's not something that's really new, but, just some innovative things to think about, whether it's maybe, hey, I'm going to do a coach's show, or, podcasting, or whatever it is. Maybe you can add that into kind of like a media stipend. If it's a big time tennis program. Now, if you're just over on, using the elementary school courts across the street, and your school's really not invested, they're probably not going to give you that. But if you're at a program that's known for tennis and it's prestigious, they're going to have all that in there for you, or probably already.
Well, Katy, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time. You packed in a lot there. We got through a lot of questions. That was outstanding. So really appreciate your time there. Thanks to you and Chad for your interest in college tennis and your work in college tennis. And we look forward to staying in touch.